Welcome to The Spotlight, the podcast where veterans and military spouses connect and share how their military experience has transformed their lives and their businesses. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Louthan, founder of the VeteranCrowd Network, the network that brings veterans and veteran-led businesses together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. And you are tuning into The Spotlight. Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Louthan, host of The Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. And welcoming my guest today, we're going to be talking about franchising, a topic that I know a little bit about, but our guest knows a lot about. Michael Arrowsmith is the Chief Development Officer of Pinch a Penny. He's got a long career in the franchising industry. We're going to talk about franchising and veterans in the franchising industry. Michael, welcome to the program. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all our listeners out there who are veterans and part of the veterans. I mean, we couldn't do what we do today at Pinch a Penny or what we're doing today in talking if it wasn't for the sacrifices that they have made. So I want to be sure to acknowledge that and let all our listeners know how much I appreciate that.
Hey, before we jump into franchising itself, share with our guests just a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and you got a 25-year plus career, I guess, in the franchising industry.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in California and spent the first part of my career out in that area of the country. And you are correct. I do have quite a bit of experience in franchising. I've essentially spent my entire career in some form or fashion of franchising. It's a little bit of an eclectic career in that I started out on the accounting and finance side, so on more of the traditional business side. I then transitioned by selling company locations. I worked for a company that probably everybody knows called Denny's Restaurants. Mm-hmm. Selling company stores to franchisees, which was my first introduction into that world. After I left there, I actually spent some time buying and selling different franchises for franchisees that wanted to get in and out of different franchise systems, which allowed me, Bob, the opportunity to kind of look under the tent, peek under the tent and see kind of what happened on some of these brands, large brands like Yum, who Yum owns Taco Bell and KFC, mm-hmm. and Burger King, as well as some smaller players. So it allowed me to do that. I sort of got bored with that and went back into franchising and did everything from a one-man franchisor, where I actually worked for a small brand doing all facets of it, into what I do today as a Chief Development Officer. And along the way, I actually owned a couple businesses myself, which were not franchised, and we can get into that as well. So I have kind of an eclectic background that really helps when we talk to different business owners, because I try to, as much as possible, understand where they're coming from and what their concerns are and what we can do to either help them either on at Pinch a Penny or in franchising in general and point them in the right direction.
You know, franchising's been around for a while. Everybody sort of points to Ray Kroc, who sort of bought the little McDonald's and turned it into what it is today. How big is the franchising industry in the United States? Let's just start at the high level, and then we'll start to drill down.
Well, it's I believe I read a stat the other day that 42 cents of every dollar is spent on a franchise brand. And I was actually surprised. I thought it was higher than that, and that stat might be a little small. But we're a world of brands. If you think about it, people get a great comfort in brands, and so I think that's part of the key of franchising, is that it gives a certain comfort level to a certain amount of brands. And people feel comfort in recognition, whether that be McDonald's, like you mentioned, or a large corporate brand like Nike, or you could even say governments are brands to a certain extent. And so our world today takes comfort in that. And, I think franchising is one of the best, I think it is the best business model right now. We can get into reasons for that.
Let's do that. I mean, if you're a young person or maybe a middle-aged person, I think a lot of people sort of look at starting or or buying a business maybe when they hit about 40, let's say. They've gotten a little bit of experience, they've built up a little bit of capital. But statistically, starting a business is a low percentage thing. Most businesses fail in the first 5 years, and an even larger percentage in the first 10 years. But franchising is a safety net to that.
Yeah, in fact, there are statistics put out by the SBA, Small Business Administration, about that. And one of the ones I recall from several years ago was that a franchise business is 3 times more likely to be successful than a non-franchise business. And I think, there's a lot of reasons for that that we'll talk about in a moment. I guess I'd like to say, though, what is that famous saying? And I don't know who said it. Maybe it was Churchill or somebody that said, capitalism isn't perfect, but it's the best economic system we have. And I think he was talking versus socialism and some of these other things. And I like to say that, franchising isn't perfect, but it's the best business model we have. And we'll talk about that, but we could also talk about why it isn't perfect and some things to watch out for along the way as well. But with franchising, in a nutshell, what you get is typically you get a proven brand. If you pick the right franchise, you get a proven brand with recognition, with a certain presence in the consumer space. You get a system and a process that you as a franchisee, who is the business owner, owns. And you're getting methodology, you're getting marketing, you're getting all of this. But you're doing the actual work yourself, and it is your business yourself. So it truly is the American dream, but it's not a pure entrepreneurial process like starting something from scratch, which is why it has, in my opinion, the greater success rate that we talked about earlier, a much greater success rate than starting from scratch, because it's a proven brand, it's a proven methodology, and there's all those things in place to help you become successful.
Now, veterans are, I don't know why, but tend to be sort of entrepreneurial people. More veterans own their own business as a percentage than the population, and a great number of veterans are going into the franchising space because of that. Can you share some statistics, and then let's talk about why franchising is something that, if you're a veteran considering owning your own business, that you might want to consider.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. Like you said earlier, a lot of the successful franchisees and franchises out there appeal to people in the mid part of their career. Certainly, there are some franchises available for people that are younger. But I believe that one of the reasons that appeals to veterans is, like, for example, our brand is a transition brand for people wanting to transition out of either corporate America or the military space, and to kind of take control of their future themselves and control their own destiny. It's a perfect avenue and vehicle to do that.
It's the first time I've heard that term, a transition brand, but that makes perfect sense. It's not, McDonald's is not a transition brand. I mean, that's sort of a,
right.
But you guys are the right choice for the individual who's making that career move.
Yes, and you certainly have to have a certain amount of capital or something to start out with. We can talk about that later. We can certainly talk about that when you're trying to pick a franchise. But getting back to your question about why it appeals to the military folks so much, I think the military. My experience with some of the military vets in our system are they're disciplined. They're used to following a certain process and procedure. And they also are somewhat independent. They're used to working as a team. The typical entrepreneur that gets a lot of press is kind of your independent, against the grain kind of person. That's really not the norm, nor the success recipe for a franchise. You want to be somebody who fits into a team, follows a process. Not that you don't have original ideas, and we can certainly talk about. I know you brought up McDonald's. I mean, the Egg McMuffin that idea came from a franchisee. Some of their most important product innovations came from franchisees, but you're still part of a team, you're part of a system, but you have that independence of being able to to do your own thing and to be as successful as you want to be. We always say, and I always tell my team that I want to be sure that we're doing everything we can to set somebody up for success. We don't guarantee success. There certainly is no one that can do that. But if we can put the foundation, the processes, the training, everything in place to help people be successful, then the ingredient that's missing is the person coming in that follows that system, follows that process, and works hard. The other thing is that veterans are not afraid of hard work. And and there's a certain structure that comes to the franchise business that, again, I think translates easy from military life, or easier, I should say, from military life into franchising. And so, those are a lot of elements that go into it. And just the basic service itself. I mean, to have a serving type of mentality as opposed to a selling type mentality, which sounds a little odd because I know business is about selling traditionally, but really that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But in my opinion, the most successful businesses out there are the businesses that serve people, and not the ones that are trying to sell stuff necessarily. And so those are the elements that we try to bring in that we see military folks have that really appeal to us.
And now a word about a Veteran Crowd Spotlight sponsor. Cardomax is owned and operated by former Navy SEAL Sean Matson. Cardomax has designed just the right supplements for you and is offering Veteran Crowd an exclusive offer. Buy one, get one free on your first order. Go to cardomax.com and use promo code VeteranCrowd. That's cardomax.com, helping you achieve your max. Now back to your host, Bob Louthan.
We're talking with Michael Arrowsmith, Chief Development Officer of Pinch a Penny. I'm curious, this pops into my mind with COVID and with the environment that we've had economically in the last 18 months as a result of the pandemic. What impact has that had on the franchising industry? I mean, is franchising more resilient in an environment like this?
So let me answer that in two ways, Bob. I would say it all depends on the franchise brand. So, for example, on a brand like ours, we have a couple different revenue streams coming in. We're service, we're retail, but because we're in the pool business, servicing pools, maintaining pools, we did quite well during the pandemic. And I always try to kind of lower my volume of my voice when I say that, because I know a lot of people were hurting during that time, and I want to be respectful of that. But our business, we're up solid double digits. And so not everybody in the franchising world can say that. And that's not something else to look for is I think if you're a military vet transitioning out, you want to look for a brand that's been around for a while, that's gone through ups and downs of whether it's the financial issues that happened in 2008, 2009, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's other things that have gone on, like Pinch a Penny, for example. We've been around since 1975. We've seen our share of ups and downs, and yet we continue to go on an upward trajectory of sales. And you can look at like franchise disclosure documents and other things to get a sense for that. But getting back to your question about the franchising industry in general, I would say in general, even though some industries were hard hit, like restaurants, I think franchising, again, because it's more of a system and it's more of a team, that I know a lot of great franchise brands really reached out and help their franchisees, whether that was on deferral of fees or helping negotiate with landlords or other things, to kind of help them get through that. And those are the resources that you have at your disposal, or you can take advantage of as a franchise. You cannot as a franchisor. Again, we were fortunate enough not to be in that situation, and there's a organization called Franchise Business Review, which is online, that they go through a lot of kind of analysis of different franchises. So you can kind of see like what franchises are resistant to economic downturns, which ones are best for military veterans. In fact, we're on that, actually. We're in the top 10 of best franchises for military veterans. And they do all of their evaluation based on franchisee satisfaction. So they come to an organization like ours, or any franchise organization out there, and they say, will you give us permission to survey and give us a contact information for your franchisees, but it's kind of a leap of faith for us because we don't have any input in it. They independently survey the franchisees. So if you go to this particular website, and by the way, I have no affiliation with them. They're a separate business. I'm not trying to pitch them at all. But really what I'm trying to say is there are independent people out there like them that evaluate certain aspects of franchising so you can see what works best for you.
So let's talk about a veteran considering franchising. Where do you start?
Yeah, so I think where you start is with yourself. I mean, you have to really think about, why do you want to get into franchising? Why do you think it would be a good match for you? And then what appeals to you about franchising? And I'll give you an example of a vet that came to us in a few moments. But let me just say, if you're a military vet and you spend your time outside, you might not want to go become a fast food franchisee who's spending their days inside,
Right.
all the time. On the other hand, if that resonates with you, then that's a franchise that you should go towards. But I'll give you an example of a veteran franchisee that just came to us. In fact, he just opened his store in February of this year, February of 2021. And I don't know if I can use his name or not, but I'll use his first name. Ted came to us. He was a 35-year vet and was, I don't think he was ready to retire, because even though 35 years sounds like a long time, I mean, he wasn't like, ready to retire yet. So he was interested in a business and interested in something that he could do himself, but he was also interested, and this was kind of key for our brand, he's also interested in setting up something that his family could go into and set up kind of a family legacy. And that's really a part of our brand that's pretty important. I mean, we're owned by family. We're not like owned by Wall Street or private equity. We're family owned. Our franchisees are typically families, and we service families. If you think about our business, we're all about family fun and sanitary environments. So we're out servicing families. So everything about us is with families. So that appealed to him, but he also wanted to have, how can I set up a business so that my next generation of family members can actually thrive? And so he has a son in his 20s who's engaged to be married. And so he went into business with his father. And that was part of the appeal to Ted, was, what business can I get into that's going to be super successful, has all the elements that we've talked about, and also something that can set my family up for the future. And what I love about it is he did an interview. In fact, you can go to our website and read about it. And at the end, he says, I want everybody in my community to know that this is a veteran who has served the community, and I'm not done serving the community, because now I'm serving it here. And so that's something that appealed to him.
So, franchising nationally is regulated really kind of at the state level. My numbers may be wrong on this, but I think 37 states have very specific franchising laws. And so you guys have to produce what used to be called a franchise offering circular. I think it's a disclosure document now. So a person gets their hands on that, and that sort of begins the process. It discloses all of the the risk factors and so forth, I imagine, about becoming a franchisee. One of the risk factors is getting the capital to invest in the business. Can you talk a little bit about reviewing the franchise documentation and thinking about having the capital that you need to invest to become a franchisee?
Yeah, Bob, that is a great question, and it's the next step. I went down that rabbit hole a little bit on talking about being sure that a brand resonates with you. But the next step after that is to do the outside research, which is I mentioned franchise business review. There's other things to go outside. And then once you've kind of narrowed your list down to a few, you should talk to various franchises and get what's called the franchise disclosure document, which is what you're talking about, the FDD. So franchising, as you mentioned, is highly regulated. It is regulated by the FTC nationally, the Federal Trade Commission, and then various states have their own, like you mentioned, regulations, and some of them are much stricter than others in terms of registration states and non-registration states. I could go down that rabbit hole,
Right.
but I won't, because it'll take
The
up.
government doesn't make it less complicated. Let's just summarize that.
There's a couple things. So the franchise disclosure document is a big legal document, very, very thick. That being said, there's some parts of it that I think are very key, and you highlighted a couple of them. One is there's a section in there in the early part of the document. There's probably 7 or 8 super critical pieces. Let me point out 2 though. One is there's it's item number 6 or 7. I always get those 2 reversed, but it talks about the startup costs. So what happens is you've got to list the actual startup costs of what it takes to start a franchise, your particular franchise. That's a very important piece of when you're trying to figure out, like you said, how much capital am I going to need to get into a franchising business? And so there's a section specifically on that that outlines actual costs. There's another section that I think is something everybody should pay attention to. It's item 19, and it's called the franchise performance representation. This is where a franchise has to list out, or has the opportunity to list out their financials. So how many, well, there's also a section talking about how many locations. For example, we have 260 locations. That's important because
the franchisor has to open up the kimono and yes, bear all, doesn't it?
Yeah. And item 19 will, like for ours, will state our average sales, our trend of the last several years, and it has to be based on actual real information. So, and some franchisors don't put that in. You're not required to put in an item 19. That to me, if you're evaluating, is a big red flag. If a franchisor is not willing to state how their franchises are doing, then that would be a red flag. Now, you got to be a little bit careful in that, and I'll use our brand as an example. You don't get P&L information, profit and loss information, bottom line information on our FDD, because we don't require that information from our franchisees. So you only get top line sales. That being said, if a franchise does require, full P&L, I don't know of many that do, then they could provide that information. But there's other ways of getting at that financial information. Like, for example, on our brand, we will ask you to go to different franchises in our system and ask them those kind of questions. And you have to build a business plan. We ask you to build a business plan, which isn't super complicated, by the way. We help you do that. Other franchisees help, so that you understand the economics of what you're getting into. Part of that business plan, Bob, is coming up with how much is this going to cost to start the franchise, and then how are you going to finance it? Where's your source of funding come from? There's another section in the franchise disclosure document that talks about what type of lending sources are out there, or do you provide internal lending? For example, in our brand, Pinch Penny, we provide financing. You don't have to take our financing, but we just find that to make it easier for the franchisee, with no fees, with no waiting, like if we provide the financing on terms that are comparable with the SBA, which ours are, with no fees, then it speeds the whole process up, and there's no prepayment penalty. The SBA has prepayment penalty. So we just try to make it as easy as possible. Those are things that the franchise disclosure document will tell you, and you'll get a sense for what kind of capital and cash you'll need to come into this venture with.
Once you become a franchisee, one of the really important things is training. Can you talk a little bit about how franchisors train franchisees on their systems, and at the beginning and also on an ongoing basis, the support that franchisors give franchisees on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I think that's a very important key piece. I think there's a couple ways that you can look at that. I'm going to keep kind of referring back to the franchise disclosure document, because there's key pieces in the franchise disclosure document that will help you determine that. But let me just say, first of all, most franchisors will put on their website what type of training that they provide, and most, and I'll just talk about our brand. Like, we'll provide a month of training here in Clearwater, Florida, hands-on training, both in the classroom, in pools, on routes. It's a very intense. You'll come away with a couple certifications, certified pool operator being one of them, a couple other certifications. That's a whole month-long process. We go through that process on our website, but also on our franchise disclosure document, it will state what the training is, the ongoing training as well. The other important thing about the franchise disclosure document, it'll mention if there's any cost for that. So for example, on our brand, that's all included. You don't have to pay extra for it. You pay us an initial franchise fee, which all brands charge, but some brands will charge you a training fee. So you want to be careful of that. And by the way, I'm not saying that those are bad, evil brands that they do that, but you have to add up, like, is your initial fee all encompassing? You could have a very small initial fee and then you have all these other fees too. So again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I am saying is be sure that you're aware of all the costs. So for us, for example, you just show up here, you have to pay for, your room and board and getting here, but we don't charge at all. Also for our brand, and this is stated both on our website and on our franchise disclosure document, like most brands hopefully would have, is ongoing. So you can come back to training at any time you want. You could send employees anytime you want. We also have annual conferences where we have continuing education on our products. And at Pinch a Penny, we have multiple streams of revenue. One of them is backyard services like leak detection of a pool or landscape lighting or power washing. And so once a year, when we get all our owners together, and we don't charge owners for this either, this is just something that we provide, once a year, we'll do additional training on other services that you can offer. You're not required to do these, but there's another way to kind of scale your business and make it bigger if you'd like to. And so those are things that are important to kind of do an analysis on when you're taking a look at it. And if you don't mind, I think also, if you're a military vet coming out, I think it's important also to look at what franchisors are recognizing veterans and kind of putting their money behind their mouth in that regard. Meaning, for example, on our initial franchise fee, we give a 50% discount for military veterans and their families out. Now,
that's astounding.
That's a really high one, and probably one of the highest in the industry. And I'm not, any other franchise, you don't have to do 50%, but if I was a military vet going out, I would look for somebody that at least is doing some type of recognition program or discounting it. Again, it doesn't have to be 50%. Ours is 50%. But our organization, we're very grateful to the military. We support military organizations, which is another thing to look at too. If that's important to you as a military person coming out of the military, I think it's important to look at franchisors and say, are they walking the talk? Not just offering a discount necessarily, but are they supporting veteran activities? And I can go through the list of some of the things that we do, but I don't want to make this a commercial for Pinch a Penny. But I would just say, if you did research, you would see that we do a lot of other supportive veteran activities. And if that's important to you, that's something that you should pay attention to when you're researching franchises.
Another thing that franchisors do is basically they will centralize the marketing and advertising effort. I think that's an important thing to consider. They'll often have, the 800 number call center, those types of things. What are sort of the soft support issues that someone should consider when looking at a franchise operation like that?
Yeah, so those are very, very good points and things that people should pay attention to. Let me take a step backwards though, and talk about some other services that you might want to look at that a franchisor could provide. So when you're in a retail location, whatever that be, whether that be a Pinch a Penny, a food, anywhere, you've got to have a location. So you have to look at, is it important to you to have a franchisor provide those services? So for example, on our brand, we're completely turnkey, meaning we'll find a location for you. We'll help with the contractor that builds the location. We do all of that. And so we want you focused on training, because we can pretty much take anybody and train them on how to take care of a pool and do that part of it. But that's where we want your focus. And we want you to get open right away. So we, as an example, we will find the real estate. We'll do all of this. we haven't closed a location over 30 years. So we know what we're doing with real estate. We want to control it also to set you up for success, which is another reason why we do it. But my point here is that some brands, you have to find the real estate and then they just approve it. Again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying those are things to watch for when you're trying to identify what type of support that you have. Then once you go through that process, we already talked about training, that's a support thing, and then marketing. So marketing is how can you get people to come through your front door? That's the role of what our marketing department does, or most marketing departments do. Like, we as a brand and most franchise brands do not want you paying attention to, how much social media do you have to do and how much direct mail do you have to do and do you have to do commercials or anything like that. No, we take care of all of that. And so that's something to be careful of. And it's something that you should expect a franchisor to do, because the expectation should be that the franchisor is kind of hopefully doing everything they can to drive the business to your door. And then you as a franchisee, once you get the people in your door, you should be doing everything you can to keep that customer. And that's where your focus should be on. And so again, going back to something you said earlier about why the military is so good in franchising, is they seem to have an intuitive, or maybe it's a training to know, some people have this job and some people have that job. Our job is to get the customers to you. Your job is to take care of that customer and get them to come back to you, to your business. And if it works, that's the way it should work. And when it works perfectly, it's a beautiful thing to see. And I wish I could tell you, Bob, that it works perfectly all the time. It doesn't. But that's the goal. That's the aim. And in that aspect, that's why we try to do the marketing. We try to keep the training up. We try to do all those things so that the franchisee is able to take care of that customer.
Hey, we've been talking with Michael Arrowsmith, Chief Development Officer of Pinch a Penny. Michael, 30 minutes goes by quick. We're at the end of our window. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight. Real quickly, how can people get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is just go to our website, which is pinchapennyfranchise.com. That's probably
pinchapennyfranchise.com. We'll put links to that and other useful links for Pinch a Penny and for Michael Arrowsmith. Michael, thanks for stepping into the spotlight. Appreciate you being our guest today.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity. And please, if any of your listeners have any questions about franchising in general, they can feel free to follow up with us. It doesn't have to be Pinch a Penny related. We just try to do everything that we can to give back to the men and women that really have enabled us to do what we do. So we're just grateful for that. And I appreciate the time today with you.
Hey, you've been listening to the Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. We have been talking franchising today with Michael Arrowsmith, Chief Development Officer of Pinch a Penny. Michael, I'm going to throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you for being our guest today, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by VeteranCrowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.